Geocachomaniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
Welcome to episode 286. You know, that used to be a processor of the GeoGearHeads. I am Chris of the Northwest with our illustrious host, that means he sometimes glows, Daryl W4.
Yeah, only when I've been out in the sun too long.
Or near nuclear power plants.
I was going to say, or if I go, caching near one of those,
Chernobyl,
old cooling
Chernobyl
towers.
caching.
Yeah, it does happen, though, usually not to me. I don't tend to get over to Russia often enough.
I thought you were in a hurry and you were always Russian.
I am Russian around, but, not in Russia.
Okay.
But we are back today with a very special guest who many of you might have heard on another geocaching podcast, at least twice. And he's back this time to talk more about some of his travels. And we're going to welcome back Retired Guy. First time back on this show, but you're no stranger to podcasts.
Hello, good evening.
Well, thanks for joining us, and we're going to get some interesting stories. I've already taken a quick look through your notes here, but why don't we kick it off with a little bit about yourself and what is probably Chris of the Northwest's favorite geocaching name.
Well, my name is Retired Guy. I retired about 12 years ago. I used to run a international business, and hence I traveled tons and tons. But all my travel left me pretty much spending all my time in either a hotel or a conference room. And though I was on a plane all the time, I did not really get to see the world. Unfortunately, I was not a geocacher back then, or most of it was prior to even geocaching existing. I retired 12 years ago, and a friend of mine introduced me to the sport, and I decided to start seeing the world by way of geocaching with my wife, going back to many of the places I had visited for work, but also finding new destinations and new excuses to go visit countries I barely have heard of.
And that are probably difficult to pronounce.
A few of them are. I kept stumbling on Namibia. I wanted to call it Nambia or something. Swaziland, I had to look up where it was and things like that. So I've definitely learned geography I missed out in high school, or probably some of those countries had other names back then.
That's right. I'm still confused about all the stands. Not sure which one's which.
I still do need a Stan road trip at some point. I have not swept through there yet.
Chris, have you ever been able to pass up a donut stand?
Well, a stand is different than the countries that end in stan.
With our donut theme that we had going earlier this year, I had to ask.
Yeah. Hey, I'll tell you, we finally have a high-end donut place that's just a mile up the road here that they've been advertising for 2 years, and it opened last week. So,
wow, time for a caching event.
Oh, there you go. It's big enough.
So let's kick it off. And the first thing you have in your notes here is it's not about the numbers, and you say that can be cured.
Yes, well, I started off probably like many cachers trying to get the numbers, and being up originally in the Boston area, numbers were tough. There are no significant power trails up there. A good day often was 5 or 10 caches, and keeping a streak alive during the winter takes true dedication, and I would normally give up on that. But eventually, I moved down to Florida to be near my parents and started doing power trails and putting together trips out to Vegas and doing the Nevada power trails. Pushed my numbers up to 10,000 and started scratching my head and said, where is all this headed? There are obviously people that will have done 20,000 and 30,000 and 40,000. Do I just want to keep on doing that? So it kind of cured me of saying, all right, I have to be getting numbers every single day. It was really nice to have actually stepped through that process. And I still enjoy a power trail every now and then, because it sometimes is grabbing a team of 7 or 8 people and attacking it. But now I look at it quite a different focus and try identifying some different goals in my geocaching. So what I started on just a couple of years ago was identifying caches or lists of caches that I eventually wanted to get to. And I took the program iCaching and dropped into it all the oldest caches in each state, the oldest caches in each country, all the caches from year 2000, all the webcam caches, since they are a dying breed, all caches that have at least 1,000 favorite points, and anything that will get me a souvenir, because I started collecting souvenirs quite wildly. So that may be getting all the states in Germany or in Ireland, because they have souvenirs associated with them. And then I obviously look at other caches along the way. But I now am set up that where I travel, I try not to miss anyone in that category. And I have friends that have other things in it. One that will not miss virtual anywhere he goes. Another friend that is trying to collect as many different reviewers as possible. So identifying caches that have a different reviewer suddenly puts it on his radar. And another one that is doing counties and their challenges of trying to connect counties and work your way across the United States with a contiguous line of counties, and just different ways of looking at caching. But to me, I've got my map now and trying to pick up oldest in each state, oldest in each country, any new country, Y2K caches and things like that.
Well, I can definitely relate to the virtuals, because I'll go for any virtuals and webcams just because they are grandfathered.
Add the Y2000 to those. Grab every year 2000 cache you can find. Never pass one of those up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I usually do those. They're just not common enough that I can hit them often enough to even really put them on the list. You see, I don't get to travel so much because I have to work and, deal with the dog and family and all that kind of stuff.
The dog and pony show?
The dog and family show. How's that?
There you go. So how many year 2000 caches are out there? I mean, there can't be that many from those days. Number one, not many were placed. And to have them survive 17 years is...
I think the count right now is down to 116.
Okay.
I've got 35 of them. I will just keep on plugging away at them. I don't know if I'll ever be able to get them all.
I heard a count of 38 active in the U.S. I don't know that that's right. I'd have to go and dig it up, and now I want to do that. But yeah, it's not that many, and it is still dwindling.
Yes. I know there's at least one very, very tough one, the Kenya virtual, and that was where someone scratched their initials or onto a tree many, many hours from any civilization, and the tree has apparently died, fallen over, and is not there anymore. But the cache still exists, and at some point I'll have to get out into the wilderness of Kenya.
I do recall hearing about that one. And it's one of those that people basically say it's worth a trip just to do it, just to get that. But it's also interesting place to be because it's so different from most places cachers go.
Yes.
Nice. So now you do virtuals, obviously. I mean, who doesn't? Everybody should be doing virtuals. What about Earth caches? Are you a fan of the Earth cache as well?
I am a reasonable fan of them. The problem I have with them, different from the ones I just named, is their number is obviously growing. And when I clear an area of Earth caches, 2 more appear for every one I got. And In some ways, they're getting a little bit diluted. That I think I've read enough about beach erosion over and over again that sometimes it gets a little bit too much.
And how many glacial erratics are there in the world?
Yes. But yes, I do often grab earth caches, but I do not go really far out of my way for them.
All right, I am not coming up with the way to find those caches on Project GC that are 2,000 caches, Y2K. But I will keep searching because now I am totally lost in this one. But can you give us a rundown of some of the places that you have gone caching outside of the U.S.?
Sure. I'm up to now 81 different countries, which does not even put me top in the United States. There are 4 people in front of me. And I still am proceeding ahead to add new countries. Just recently, my wife and I had a free weekend, and a new discount airline called Norwegian Air Shuttle put in direct service from Orlando, Florida to Oslo, Norway. And so we decided to hop on the plane for a weekend and go see Norway. So we visited a mega event up in Norway associated with Vikings, and we went climbing a rock called Pulpit Rock, which is famous in many pictures. We had heard about it. We met a geocacher from Norway while we were hiking in Oregon, and he showed us pictures of Pulpit Rock. It was about 2 years ago, and we put it in our to-do list. At some point, we have to get there. And so off we flew to Oslo 2 weekends ago, got to Pulpit Rock, got to a mega event, and we're back Monday night. So picked off Norway as my 81st country.
In a weekend.
In a weekend.
Nice. In a weekend, you really don't have to deal that much with jet lag. You just go, sleep on the plane on the way back.
Well, I really do not have much issue with jet lag. It was a talent I developed in my business days. I flew to the Orient roughly 70 times for business. I counted 54 Japanese stamps in my passports at one point. So I traveled a lot, lived on airplanes, and so now hopping on one feels similar to just hopping in a car for a trip.
Okay, good. Daryl, have we lost you? Are you?
I am in research heck over here trying to figure this out. I know I've done this very search before on Project GC, but for the life of me, I can't find out, or I can't find where I can set it up, and it's driving me insane. You know how those go, I'm sure.
Oh, let's see. I found a list here. 48. Well, no, that's the users. 116. You're correct. Year 2000 caches.
Where did you find that?
I Googled, and I came up with a list on geocaching.com. Here, I'll paste that in the show notes.
Ooh.
There you go.
I tried doing the advanced search, and that didn't help me either. Okay, this is a bookmark list. Let's take a quick look, see if any of those have... Oh, one at least has gone away.
Yeah, the oldest or the second oldest New Zealand went away recently.
Yep.
The land it was on was
48.
purchased, and they had to remove it.
Yeah, I heard about that one.
So
See,
to be
that's the thing that
fair,
always makes me nervous.
to be fair, 35 of the ones I have, one of them is that New Zealand cache that has disappeared. So I guess I could go above 116 because I have at least that one and maybe some others that have been archived.
Sure. Yeah, and it looks like that's the only one of those 116 just scrolling through that list.
And I definitely have a big lack of smileys on that entire list.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, I don't think you get any smileys on the bookmark list.
Okay, well, good. Because I know I found GC12. and I've GC16. I know I have those two.
Yeah, I know I've done a couple of the Y2K caches, and I have no smileys on any of these.
And GCD. So I know there's 3 on the first page I've done.
You know what I can do is create a pocket query from this.
I know. I was thinking the same thing.
The rat holes we go down with interesting topics. Okay, run this query. Oh, you know what? You can't do any filtering on it. I was thinking you could filter that. But what we can do is preview that and get whether we've done any of these, because then it gets us these smileys. So, does it actually let me sort by? No, it doesn't.
Yeah, the one in Rift Valley. I was in Rift Valley before I geocached. That's a shame. So let's see. The only year 2000 caches I have are in Washington and Oregon. Why am I not doing more year 2000 caches?
Probably because there's not a whole lot of them to be done.
Oh, yeah.
I only have 4 of the ones that are on that list. All right, let's get back to retired guys' travels here, because, well, that's why we're here. We're not here to play with our stats.
Well, you seem to be enjoying yourself, so I did not want to interrupt.
Well, thank you for that, but we do get distracted by the shiny objects.
Yes. Well, so do I.
Just hope that there's no alerts going off for like a first to find.
I've got to go now.
Oh, darn. It's a first to find at that new donut shop. First to bite. Anyway, so I understand, have some tips for geocachers and marriage?
Yes. I recently went on an extended trip, almost 3 weeks, to Southern Africa. And my wife and I went with a couple, Paul and Virginia Friesen, who are marriage counselors and have been our marriage mentors over the years. And they have been dragged along on various short geocaching adventures, but they got to watch me for a full 3 weeks. And they started working on an article, and hopefully this will get finished at some point, on marriage and geocaching, some of the similarities, some of the skills that geocachers have that they should be applying to their marriages, and a lot of really fun, interesting insights. So I was the subject of their research for 3 weeks as I dragged them off to Swaziland or Namibia to go get a cache and then return back over the border almost immediately.
Wow. Nice. And we should go out and look at that research, read the book, but did it end well?
It did end well.
Oh, good. Okay.
I think one of the things they quickly noticed was as I've switched from targeting caches and very happy to get 1 or 2 caches in a day, I'm not taking the entire group and running them off to go get 50 because they're all in that town. So I have my targeted cache in Namibia, and I don't care if I get a second cache in Namibia. I cross the border, we have lunch, we all get to say we've been there, but I'm not trying to grab numbers anymore. And that has helped the marriage, helped friends that might be traveling with me that are not quite into it as I might be.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, is the wife a geocacher, or is she just geocaching tolerant?
She is a slight geocacher.
Okay.
She hates any urban cache. I think because she feels at any time a police officer is going to come up and arrest you for feeling around underneath a bench or taking something apart or whatever you might be doing. But she loves going on hikes into the woods and finding the more traditional type caches over the years. So she has joined me on a lot of the year 2000 caches. We just picked up several in California and had some wonderful hikes going for those.
Doug, did I hear you say she dragged you?
No, I don't think I said that.
Okay. I was like, what? Wait a minute now.
She did drag me on a new country. I was doing some consulting work over in London, and she was the one that pointed out that Icelandic Air allows a free stopover for 24 hours in Reykjavik on the way back from Europe.
Oh,
And
fabulous.
so we stopped in Reykjavik. I got my Iceland cash. We went to some fun restaurant. We got to see a little bit of downtown Reykjavik, and then we hopped back on the plane and headed home.
Now,
but that was her idea.
Okay, so fair statement there. Now, when you're planning something like that, that's somewhat spur of the moment, are you still going for the oldest cache in Iceland, or are you just doing a cache that's convenient to your other tourism in that country?
I have my map up, and I will look at where the oldest cache is in that country. I will look at and see if it has any year 2000 caches, if there's any caches that have 1,000 favorite points. And if it's within reason, that will become my targeted cache, or 2 or 3. But in the case of Iceland, I actually did this before I started paying attention to the oldest in the countries. So I don't even know where the oldest in Iceland is. I'm looking over a map on my right-hand side, and it looks like it's not actually that near Reykjavik. I could be wrong.
Okay. In the chat, Wet Coaster says it helps a lot when your wife, husband, partner is also a geocacher. There's a lot less rolling of the eyes.
Yes.
I certainly remember when I first started geocaching, and that whole world opens up to you, and you're like, oh, there's a cache there. There's a cache there. There's a cache there. And my wife now famously says, of course there is, dear. And, I don't have to stop. I, realize we can go on. And like you, I've become more targeted. A quick look at the map from those year 2000 caches. A lot of them are not just your quick park and grabs. They're, up in a mountain. It's going to be quite a hike to get to some of them.
Yes, I would guess they average 2-3 hours a piece. So they are definitely not park and grabs.
Right. I was I'm planning a trip, and I go, oh, look, there's one on the way. And I, zoomed in, and no, it's in the middle of a state park. I'm like, well, that's not a quick stopover to.
Here's a quick map of Reykjavik and its relation to the oldest cache in Iceland, and it was nowhere near. So I'm glad I did not know where it was, because that would have been quite the trek to get into the center of Iceland to get the cache.
Exactly. Yeah, when you look at the map, you see the road goes around the edge of the country, of the island of Iceland, but nothing in the middle.
Yes.
So. Very good. Now, Doug, in all your travels, Wet Coaster also wants to know, what countries besides Cuba don't allow you to take a GPSR? Have you run into this in your travels?
I originally had a little bit of trouble in China. They've somewhat lifted that, or they don't care nearly as much. Google, when I first went to China, Google Maps was turned off, and you could still run the app, but you'd have no roads underneath you or whatever. So it really did go back to printing out a lot of stuff in advance and hoping it was near the statue in the park that you thought it was.
Exactly.
So I've been back to China, and things are working much better on GPSs and everything now. But when I first went there, they were being blocked.
That brings up a really good question. Do you typically cache by GPSR or by smartphone when you're traveling overseas?
Almost always by smartphone, with the with my Garmin in my bag to take out when necessary. Most places now, the smartphone is working very well, and it's only backup that I have the Garmin.
Okay.
What I have for service now is I use an iPhone 7 Plus, but I'm on Verizon service, and Verizon has a plan where for $10 a day, you get to use your US plan. And this is true in about 200 countries. So I get almost infinite data. They actually have a couple of asterisks next to it when I'm traveling for turning it on for $10. So it's working quite well. I also had, and I'm not using it right now, a T-Mobile SIM card with unlimited data, and would drop that in when necessary.
Very good. Daryl, you've been doing some research.
I have. I was just going to say, I don't like what I'm finding, but there's a forum post from 2009 in the geocaching forums, and the countries they list are Cuba, Tanzania, is that how it's pronounced? T-U-N, Tunisia? Okay. I don't think I've heard of Tunisia. I've heard of Tanzania. Anyway, and then North Korea. Yeah.
I do not,
Star Wars was filmed in Tunisia.
Yes.
There are plenty of caches in Cuba if you're stating that these are cache countries without it. Or
these are ones that you're not allowed
GPS.
A personal GPS.
Okay.
And I do know people who have been to Cuba have done the caching without the aid of the GPS.
Yes, I know the land monkeys, since they're Canadian, they've been able to go to Cuba without restriction. And they used smartphone because they weren't allowed to bring in a GPS.
Right. And I think the smartphones are kind of exempted just because it's not a GPS only device.
Right.
It's multiple things.
Right. I think, trying to ban a GPS now is silly. I mean, you can't take the GPS out of the phone.
Right.
Well, you can forcefully once.
Anyways, and then there's another article which is even older from Directions magazine that's October 10th of 2008. They say there's 3 countries that prohibit commercial use of GPS, and that's Egypt, Syria, and North Korea. And those are the ones that I've heard. Yeah, those are the ones I've heard before that you can't bring in your GPS, but I know that there are others.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that, and I tried convincing my wife to let me cross the border into Syria when I was in Israel. I was within about a mile of the border, but she did not think that was a good idea. So I do not have a Syrian cache yet, but I would have taken my GPS with me, and little did I know it was banned there.
Yeah, at least it was 9 years
commercial
ago.
use. That would be personal use. I don't know what commercial use is defined as, but
right. Yeah. Well,
but it's probably better not trying to go to Syria right now.
Yeah, I was going to say
there are a few countries that I wouldn't want to go to.
Yeah, I know that there had been some issues with getting back into Israel from Syria.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I could imagine.
So you might have been able to go to Syria. You might not have been able to get back.
Yeah, that's a big deal. You're close enough. You just find a border crossing that's not marked. I didn't say that, though. The NSA is not listening.
I was going to say, this sounds like a good way to get shot.
Well, Doug, you bring up a good point. You're traveling to these countries. We haven't asked yet, do you speak multiple languages?
No, I speak high school French and English pretty well.
That's enough to find the bus and the library. But
yeah, what I have done is I printed up a sheet of paper where I forget exactly what it said, but it said, I am from the United States and I have a hobby that I go geocaching. Geocaching is using a GPS device to go find, blah, blah, blah. And then I translated that into about 20 different languages and have those sheets with me often on these trips, so that at least if someone stops me, I can hand them a sheet. But at one point, I decided to take one of those translations and pipe it back through Google into English. And I'm not sure it would do any good by the time Google has translated it twice. So I don't know exactly what they say, but they're probably amusing to the person. They laugh and then let me go.
Exactly. Yeah, language is unusual like that, where you can have different grammar structures and then translating it back. Anyway, okay. So since you don't speak multiple languages. You're traveling to all these countries. Have you ever run into problems? We just mentioned maybe crossing the border into Syria, they wouldn't let you back into Israel. Have you had any issues like that, or going into a country that now you suddenly don't feel safe? Or
Well, my most difficult border crossing, believe it or not, was crossing from Canada into the United States. I was up in Burlington, Vermont, and I decided to go get my first Quebec cash. This was a few years ago. And so I got up, I was going to meet my wife for breakfast. So I got up early, raced up to Canada, handed my passport to the Canadian immigrations guy, went a mile up the road. There's a graveyard there, went into the graveyard, got the cash, signed it, turned around, headed back. And the immigrations officer from the United States asked me for my passport and said, the first question they always ask, how long have you been in Canada? And I proudly looked at my watch and said, 14 minutes. And in reflecting upon that, it's probably the wrong answer. He then said, where'd you go? I said, the graveyard up the road. He said, what are you doing? Geocaching? And then from there, he goes, what's geocaching? And I decided to explain that it's kind of like treasure hunting. He said, did you find it? And I said, yes. And then he goes, could you get out of your car? Are you bringing it back? And I suddenly realized that he thought I had found a treasure, bring it back into the United States.
Sure.
And so for quite a period of time, 2 officers were taking apart the side panels of the car and trying to find the treasure that I was bringing back into the United States.
Yeah, you never want to say treasure or anything like that at the border.
Scavenger hunt is typically what I use.
I'm afraid of that because it's a scavenger hunt. You might still be grabbing something.
Yeah.
I'm still looking for the perfect way to describe geocaching to people that don't know it, that I really don't want to spend a lot of time explaining. When I was in Dubai, I had done one of these intentional 8-hour layovers on a trip I was going on. And I hopped in a taxi and asked him to take me into the center city because I wanted to see the tallest building in the world. And because in the parking lot of it, there's a geocache. And he quickly pointed out to me that the building and the shopping mall there were closed. I said, oh no, that's okay. I'm just going for a geocache. He responded, what's geocaching? And I once again said treasure hunting. He did not take off on the word treasure. He took off on the word hunting and goes, wow, you're a hunter? My cousin is a duck hunter. I can set you up going duck hunting if you want. We can go duck hunting. How we can go, let me take you there. I had to talk him down and just say, no, I'm just looking for a piece of paper.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny.
Love it.
Oh, go ahead.
The other interesting border crossing, 4 of us tried doing 6 countries in a day. Nowhere near a record. I've seen some of the records that are just unbelievable and how many people can do, but we decided to do 6. We were starting in Budapest and drove to Romania and were there at sunrise. We also had a driver with us who was a local. And by the time we got to our 6th country, Slovenia, we were listening to the driver now explain in foreign languages that we were geocachers, and we were listening to him just blah, 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 geocache, they're nuts, they're crazy. And so all we know is that we were described as crazy American treasure hunters, and we somehow got through the border easily and we moved on.
Oh.
Do you typically use taxis or public transportation when you're traveling overseas to, get a geocache?
I will sometimes because the driver can be sometimes helpful on it. I do use Uber also in countries that have it because it often doesn't require me to speak the language. I can put in the street address in English, or I can even put in the street address that the coordinates are matching, and it will tell him where to go, as opposed to me trying to explain, go to these coordinates that are on my GPSR that I'm holding out to you, and he would have no idea what I'm trying to do. So
right.
Sometimes enlisting someone else is useful.
Very good.
The other thing done on a couple of occasions is pre-contacting people to give guidance. When we were doing 6 countries in a day, I contacted a geocacher in Budapest that had done or had put out a lot of the caches in the city, and decided to get his advice on what it was going to be like for all the border crossings and timing and everything. And when you contact someone in another country that is a geocacher, they're more than happy to help out and give advice. And on a couple of occasions, even hop in the car with you and take you to a local cache if you're trying to get to it. And I know I've done the same, that some people have contacted me either in Boston or down in Florida. And I said, hey, how about if I just pick you up at your hotel and we'll go grab the ones you want to grab? And it's a lot of fun meeting someone from another country, and you end up having a great time.
Yeah,
How
absolutely.
cool is that?
I love that concept. We are getting a little bit late in the show, but let's get into some of the tools and stuff that you use. And I love, by the way, I love that translation sheet. Wouldn't that be the great like crowdsource project? Get a bunch of cachers who natively speak those languages to put together that phrase in their language that actually reads right, and distribute that.
I think that would definitely help. As I've said, I've had problems even explaining it when the person speaks English, but it would be good to get a good translation at least, and have as much detail there to satisfy them.
I'm thinking this is something that we should get geocaching.com to actually do through their sources.
Their content,
okay, let's
right.
they've got their volunteers who handle the translations. All we got to do is come up with a good short phrase that tells what you're doing. That's still, I think, the hardest part, though.
Yes.
Anyway, and you mentioned that you did Google Translate. Is that what you do for cache pages or something else?
Yes, it's if I'm really worried about the translation and the cache being difficult to find, I will translate it using Google back on the computer and print it out in its translated English. But I know many times where I've been caching in a country that is not English speaking, and I just assume I'll get close enough to it and figure it out, and then I see, uh-oh, there's a hint. And the hint decrypts, and I'm looking going, I have no clue what it's saying, so I pipe that through Google Translate, and I still have no idea what it's saying often, but every now and then I find out that that's the word for magnetic in some language I don't know, and go, okay, that helps.
Yeah, just picking out enough to know roughly what you're looking for.
Yes.
The trouble is when they say this is not a magnetic or something like that, and it doesn't translate right, and then you're looking for a magnetic, and it ends up being bison tube hanging in the tree or something.
Yes.
Anyway, and then you mentioned that you're using the smartphone and your GPSR. What apps are you using, and even what GPS is it?
It's an old Garmin. I've got duct tape holding the battery case on. I've had it since I started caching back in 7 years ago or so.
So
it
probably
still works fine.
Paperless caching?
Yes.
Yeah, so you still need the phone just to be able to read the descriptions.
Yes. All I'm doing is having that for making sure I can get to the coordinates. And every now and then, the phone just doesn't want to work.
Yeah, that's always nice to have that backup. But you also have to have, you mentioned iCaching, so you have to have a program like that to load it, since you can't just do the drag and drop of the GPX.
Correct. As I said, I set up iCaching to display for me a map. So anywhere I travel, I'm looking and saying, are there any significant caches there? And my significant caches, I guess you looked up the number, 117 year 2000 caches, 180 or so, 190, whatever the number would be, oldest in a country, 51 oldest in states, oldest in provinces, There's about 30 or 50 caches with over 1,000 favorite points. And so I've got a couple, maybe 1,000 caches loaded, that those are the ones that if I'm anywhere in the area, I will make an attempt to go for. And so those are in my GPSR and are in different files to look at in my smartphone. So I make sure I don't miss them.
And then which app are you using, or apps are you using on the smartphone?
I just use geocaching.com's app on the iPhone.
The geocaching app. All right. And then anything else that you can think of that's hardware or software that really makes the traveling easier?
No, that's about it. I often run off into a country with just my GPS, sometimes a printout, and my smartphone. And as I said, usually now Verizon on their travel pass, but I used to have a T-Mobile SIM card also, and every now and then I buy a local SIM card if I'm not supported on either Verizon or T-Mobile.
And I know you like to talk about your cache mobile as well. It's a pretty cool one.
Yeah, I think I can bring up a picture of that quickly. Hopefully.
I know Chris is jealous because he wants one.
Exactly.
What I am driving now is a Tesla X. It is a 7-seat SUV that does 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds. Has gull wing or falcon wing doors. And I justify it as being necessary to get to first to finds and also be able to go off-road in mud and everything else. So it's been a great cache mobile. If you notice the picture, it has on it a license plate saying M Pac-Man, commemorating or the fact that that was one of my early inventions, or writing the game Ms. Pac-Man, and that I have a travel bug on it, which is a custom travel bug done by a friend who has a company called Ms. Monkey, M-I-Z-Z Monkey, and she does custom travel bugs, and mine got to have a Ms. Pac-Man and the 2 ghosts and my travel bug number for my car. So it's been really fun to have that really customized one there as part of marking up my Model X.
Nice.
I'm thinking I'm going to have to look into doing something like that myself.
What, getting a Model X or getting a custom?
No, getting the custom travel bugs.
Oh,
okay.
The electric thing doesn't work yet for me, but I keep hoping. I'm thinking a plug-in hybrid in the meantime, but. Ooh.
That would probably become a little bit more practical for geocaching than if you're going to spend a 14-hour day. An electric car does not work well.
No.
But a friend has a Jeep.
Tick Magnet in the chat is asking how you build your list of caches to find, and you already kind of talked about that again, earlier. But how was it that you came up with those caches that you were loaded into iCaching?
I think they either came from Project GC or GSAC. I was remembering, it depends on which ones. I think oldest in states, oldest in countries all came from Project GC. The 1,000 favorite points, actually that came from the geocaching.com website, just setting the filter on the world and having it come out with all that have 1,000 favorite points or more. And I think the same is true for even the no, the Y2K had to be done in Project GC, I think.
That's kind of what I was thinking, but you could probably go around and build a whole bunch of pocket queries to find the Y2K caches. Doesn't work so well when you're trying to cover the whole world, though.
Yes.
Let's move on though to the power trail, because I like the idea, or the name rather, of the power trail that you did.
Sure. About 3-4 years ago, we started what was called the Retired Monkey Power Trail. And the name Retired was loaned from me and a caching friend called Cute Little Fuzzy Monkey. And I can't believe he actually goes by that name, but his wife gave him that name, and that's what he caches under. He loaned his name Monkey, so it became the Retired Monkey Power Trail, and consists of about 350 caches down the center of Florida. And the, I think, best part of it is a challenge trail that we have that is roughly 150 challenges. Most of them predate the rule changes, so there are some in there that are grandfathered in. And we've done a couple of fun things as part of it. First, we have a leaderboard that tracks how many of them you have, and the leaderboard will show who's at the top. A couple of people up there right now are Po Ann at 145 of them, Hip Pointer and Kapiti at 144, and Celebration Kim at 142. And it's fun to watch. We've got about 80 people listed on the leaderboard, or actually now it's about 120 of people that have run the trail, and then kind of use it to see how they measure up in the stats. And then as part of it, we came out with a verification page, which will test your stats against all the challenge caches that's part of it. So you can instantly see, I think you have to be a Project GC member, but you can instantly see which of the challenge caches you already fulfill the requirements for, just glancing down the list, and it will give a check mark if you pass and a X if you do not. And so that was some good initial work being done by a friend in Boston called Sloth 96, and help from Project GC in allowing us to ping their database on 150 caches every time you go to that web page. But it's been fun being able to do that and let people see where they stand. Here's the quick picture of it showing which ones you have acquired and which ones you have passed and which ones you have not passed yet. And you can kind of use it as checkpoints of when you've finally gotten to ones that you've now qualified for and have signed the logs. You can now go ahead and log. And then lastly, as part of it, we have set it up such that people doing it can get path tags or earn path tags. Anybody getting 125 or more gets our Ruby path tag. 100 or more gets a Sapphire path tag, then Gold, and then Silver, and then Bronze. So if you get more than 125 of them, we will send you out 5 path tags and make that part of your collection.
Interesting. I like that idea.
That is very cool. All right, so what do you want to do from here?
I'd like to put in one plug before we go any further. I already put in the plug for MsMonkey.com if people want custom travel bugs, which I think are quite a lot of fun. The custom decals that are travel bugs that you can put on cars or other things. But the other fun one is a guy called Map Memories. His webpage is actually through Facebook, so it's facebook.com/mapped.memories. And what that does is he builds custom maps. And if you're looking at the show, over my shoulder is a very large map of all my geocaching accomplishments. And he builds this where he can put dots on the oldest one you have found in each state or the oldest in each country, shading in each country you've gotten, each state, He can show where road trips are. He can show where your power trails might have been, and lots of statistics, and makes wonderful artwork. And I think is a really neat either item to purchase for yourself or to get as a present for someone, particularly if you can get their list of caches without them knowing, their GPX.
The My Finds, I assume, is what you have to send in for that.
Yes.
So again, you have to be a premium member, but let's face it, if you're going to be that serious about it, you're probably a premium member anyway.
Yep. So let me just bring up a copy of what that looks like. So this is the map he did for me. And for example, I can zoom in on Europe, and here are the caches I have found in Europe. Whoops, sorry. I went to the wrong place. Where red are the oldest in the country. So, and the yellow stars are caches I have found. So you can see my accomplishments as I've gone throughout Europe, and you can obviously move around and look at other areas on the map. And this becomes a great piece of artwork in my house.
Very cool.
Nice.
I've heard about the maps like that before. The only trouble is it's printed, so you don't have the option of instantly updating.
Yes, and it does mean that you have to occasionally reprint. That I suggested to Wayne, who runs the service, that he needs to do it as a subscription service and send updated maps every quarter, or every 6 months or whenever. So I'm getting.
Oh, sorry. Not only do your finds change, but sometimes country borders change and names.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the country borders changing all that often, but my finds do change.
I like the idea of the subscription service. So it's, you know, it's like those box services.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was chatting with him at Geo Woodstock and saying, you know, at least I'll go into a subscription service because I don't really want to take a brown crayon and be coloring in countries as I finish them.
As long as you stay inside the lines, it'll be fine.
Yes, it will.
All right, so let's get to some of those goals that you have before we wrap it up.
Okay. What I'm looking at is trying to say, all right, what's up and coming, and the first thing I'm trying to do is to attack Canada. A geocaching friend, Sloth96, and I are headed up to Western Canada in mid-July, and we are flying into Yellowknife and then flying from there up into Nunavut, which is a territory of Canada if you have not done much geography up there. I think there's been
most people have. They have Nunavut.
Nunavut. And from there, we're going to go from Nunavut, Northwest Territories, Yukon, British Columbia, crossing into Alaska because he does not have Alaska yet. Then come back in and pick up Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and I'm missing one. And sweep through and grab 3 Y2Ks in Idaho, and oldest in Idaho and oldest in North Dakota, I think, as part of our trip. So we got a pretty wild trip scheduled, some small planes, a seaplane, and hopefully that will get us to the point of finishing up Western Canada and getting me past 200 souvenirs, which is one of my near-term goals. Oh, and we'll hit a mega while we're in Canada, of course.
Wow, that's quite a trip, because some of that, you know, none of it, Yukon, those are not easy places to move around.
No, they're not. We originally, when we first started talking about this, were quite novice and looked at a map of Canada and realized that they had a 4 corners and thought we would just go to the 4 corners. Little do we know, there's really no way to get there. We started looking at chartering a seaplane and landing on the lake that's kind of on the four corners. And then we realized there's no caches within a couple 100 miles and whatever. So we started looking and saying, all right, well, let's find the easiest way to drive into Nunavut. And we could not find, I don't think there are any roads that connect into Nunavut. You get there by small plane and that's about it.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be roughly 2,000 miles north of the U.S. border. So going pretty far north, we'll be north of the Arctic Circle. We did not have to go there for none of it. There are places south, but while we're headed up there, we decided we were going to get our first cache north of the Arctic Circle.
Nice. If you have to go there, you may as well go, right?
Yes. And so other goals I got up and coming. My wife and I both want to see polar bears and penguins, and they're on opposite poles. So we're expecting to, in the next year, either go to the Arctic and Scandinavia, or go down to Antarctica and pick up some travel in southern South America. We don't know which we're doing yet. One would be if we travel in January, the other is if we travel in June. And I think our schedule will kind of dictate which one we do. And then probably a year or two after that, we'll pick up the other. So still want to get Antarctica. I don't have that as a continent yet. I guess I will have to find the oldest on Antarctica, and I haven't even looked where that is. So hopefully that's somewhere near and accessible and not in the center on the South Pole.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things that I've heard is if you want to go to Antarctica, the only way that you can guarantee, or I shouldn't say the way that you're going to be most likely to get there is by cruise ship, because the planes frequently never get there. They have to cancel for various weather issues perpetually. So even if you have the flight, the chances that you get there are something around 5 or 6% or something like that.
Wow.
Well, we would come in by ship anyway because we want to spend time seeing all the penguins.
Well, and there's a lot of cool shots to be had too, photography that is, of the wildlife and of the cool ice. Not that you necessarily want to see ice on a ship, icebergs, but they're built for it.
Okay, I believe the oldest cache in Antarctica is on Ross Island, and that is nowhere near where you would end up going if you take a boat from Argentina and sail to Antarctica. So I don't think I'll get the oldest cache on that continent.
No, but I know that there's some tours that go to Ross Island. But I think
yes,
I think you have to leave from like Chile.
That's a long way from what I can see, but anyway.
Yeah, but they're like long trips too. Because I know I've heard about some like month-long cruises that you can do down there.
Yep.
Wow, there are a lot of geocaches right there at the southern tip of Ross Island around McMurdo Station.
I'm going to have to learn Antarctica geography. I do not know the area well yet.
I just looked it up.
But do we know how to access Ross Island?
You come off New Zealand, it looks like.
That makes some sense, actually, because I seem to remember Ross Island being a New Zealand colony, essentially.
Okay. And yeah, then the others are off the tip of Chile.
So anyway, a couple last goals. I need to do kind of a sweep through the Caribbean. I picked off some of those islands. My very first geocache was in Aruba. A friend had told me about geocaching, but I hadn't done it yet. So I bought a Garmin, and on vacation in Aruba, we rented a Jeep and went off and started geocaching. So that was my first one, but I have a lot of the Caribbean not marked off yet. And then I'd like to, by the end of 2018, try crossing the 100-country barrier. And so I've got some work to do on that, but I've got some sweet spots of the Caribbean and a few other spots to be able to grab them. So I think I can get there. And then lastly, as we talked with our Marriage mentors during this whole thing, keep the wife happy as I geocache and have it not destroy our trips and make sure we're always still having fun.
I think that last one is the most important.
Yeah, definitely.
But when she is happy, she is much, much more tolerant of me diverting a trip to go across a border or to go off into the woods or whatever. So I am very, very careful. I don't drive her crazy of trying to grab too many. And so when I target them, I think it helps everything.
I agree.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Before we go, you do have a website that people might want to check out.
Yes, I am www.retiredguy.com.
Which I'm sure Chris is jealous of that as well.
Well, I'm not going to take it, but I would think of it. And I'm not retired, but I want to be.
See, you need the retired to go along with the website.
Yeah, I know. I'm just a tired guy.
I wonder if that website's taken.
Oh,
if it wasn't, it probably is by now.
Oh, man.
All right. Thanks again, Doug. We really appreciate you joining us on the show tonight.
Great talking to you both.
And we have some good news, I think, that we finally seem to have found that nasty background sound and stripped it out from the actual audio so we don't have to do the filtering. I'm going to try putting this one out as normal again. Let us know if you've had any of that, what's been described as like the beeping sound in the audio this time around.
Definitely. And we've got shows coming up, probably without the beeping sound. June 29th, that's just next week. We're going to do one of our favorite types, the randomized show. July 6th, we're doing multi-device caching with Shermanator 18, good friend of the show. July 13th, attending mega and giga events with Memphis Mafia. Excuse me on that one. July 20th, we're doing another road caching show. We have done so many of these. Like the one you're listening to tonight, this one upcoming on July 20th is Road Caching 13 with Rock Chalk.
Check the Cache-A-Maniacs website at cacheamaniacs.com for more on the GeoGearHeads, including show notes for this and all of our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback by emailing geogearheads at cacheamaniacs.com or through social media. Your support helps keep the Cache-A-Maniacs shows coming. Please consider becoming a patron through the link on our website to support the Cache-A-Maniacs shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Suffenauer and Daryl Wanberg. This show is copyright 2017 by Daryl Wanberg. All rights reserved.
Cache with the Cache-A-Maniacs.